Hello class, how are you? This is Friday, May 8th, 2020. Let's continue to work on standard scores, and I'm sure you are looking at today's agenda. The first one is what is standard score? And the second is what are the two common standard scores? And third is how to calculate the standard scores. So let me answer some of those questions. Let me close the music first. Okay, those who attended a Zoom meeting on Wednesday, I hope you still remember the standard scores. There are two common standard scores, which is z-scores and t-scores. And the first question, what's the standard scores? You can see your percentile, and you can compare your score. Compare to the mean. So if you look at on the right side right here, if your score is right in the middle, right, so you are the same as the mean. What if your z-score is +3? Your score is right here. That means you are +3 standard deviation above the mean. What about your z-score is -2? That means your score is -2 standard deviation below the mean. So now you can see where your score is located. So that will give you a percentile as well, right? So that's the first question. You can see your percentile in the distribution when you compare your score to the mean. So you can see your score's location. You are better than the normal, the mean, or you are below the mean, right? So there are two common standard scores, z and t scores. The next, how do we calculate standard scores? You can calculate z scores first. To get the t-score, as you can see here, you need to calculate the z-scores to get the t-scores. That means if you have z-scores, and you can calculate t-scores by putting z-scores into t-scores formula, right? So z-score is from x minus x bar over standard deviation. Here x means your score, or each x numbers, minus the mean. This is the mean. And S stands for standard deviation. So x is each value. For you to better understand, x is your score. So your score is subtracted by mean and divided by standard deviation. Okay, so I'll give you about 10 seconds for you to take a note on those three. What is standard scores? You need to standardize your score to see your percentile in the distribution right here. If your score is better than the mean, so you are on the right side. What if your score is less than, lower than the mean? Then your score will be located on the left side in this normal distribution or bell-shaped curve, right? So once you calculate your score into z-score, which is one of two common standardized scores, you will have your z-score right here. Z-score is typically ranging from -3 to +3. So for example, if your z-score is plus 3, meaning that your score is on the right side, you are better than the mean. And you are plus 3 standard deviation above the mean. So your score is away from the mean. How far is your score away from the mean? Plus 3. Plus 3 standard deviation above the mean. I still remember on Wednesday, Kenny asked me about how to pass CBEST to become a public school teacher in California. They set the z-score of 0.5. So if you are a little bit better than the mean, right? A little bit better than mean, about 60-70 percentile, then you will pass the CBEST. Okay? So let me show you the second page. The next one is there are several ways that you can calculate z-scores. And same thing, once you have a z-scores, you can calculate t-scores as well. The first way to calculate a z-score is, well, you have to calculate by hand using the formula, right? So you have to use the formula. Then you need to calculate the z-score equals x minus x bar over s, right? So that's the first way to calculate the z-score. To calculate z-score, you need to calculate the mean right here. You need to calculate mean, mean right here. You need to calculate standard deviation, right? The second one is you can use Excel program that will give you z-scores. However, you need to work with some the function equations, and that is a little bit difficult, but I will demonstrate how to calculate z-scores using Excel program. My recommendation to calculate z-score is to use SPSS. That is relatively easy. Just by clicking one box, you will get the z-scores. Okay, so I will demonstrate those 3 ways to calculate z-scores. And I would also talk about some differences between z-scores and t-scores in terms of how they range in scores. Which one has positive and negative scores on the standard scores. Okay, let's take a look at the normal distribution. So if your score is same as a mean, your z-score is, your z-score is 0. That means your score is not away from the mean. You are not deviating from the mean, right? What if your z-score is positive 3? That has several information. This is the mean. Your score is located right here, which is the z-score of positive 3. That means your score is better than the mean. How far is your score away from the mean? You are plus 3. Standard deviation above. What if your z-score is negative 3? You are negative 3 below the mean. So your score is negative. This side is a positive. Half of this normal distribution from midpoint to all the way to the right is 50%. All the way from left to the mean is 50%. So typically, what if your score is somewhere around here, roughly plus 1.25 right here. Then you need to look at the Z tables or normal distribution probability table that you can find from class note, that you can see your specific percentile in the distribution. Okay, so let's practice with concept 3-2, and you can see a data set 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 8. So what if you have a data set that has 7 numbers, n equals 7, and in this case mean and standard deviation are given for you to be able to calculate z-scores. However, if you have to start with mean and standard deviation, you need to go back to your course class note how to calculate mean and standard deviation. But from now, I'm not going to ask you to calculate mean and standard deviation by hand. Everything will be given for you to be able to calculate z-scores. So I want you to pay close attention to how to calculate z-scores right there. Z-score. Once you have a z-score, you can calculate your t-score as well, right? So here, let's practice how to calculate z-scores. You have 7 numbers that I already wrote down for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 8. So first step that you need to do using this formula is x minus x bar. So x is 1 right here from 1. What about the mean? Is already given. 3.86. So x minus x bar equals 1 minus 3.86. What about when x is 2? 2 minus x bar equals 3.86. So you can just practice all the way bottom. So what if x is 8? Then you can put x value right there. X minus x bar mean is 3.86. Then you can get the values for x minus x bars to negative 2.86, negative 1.86, negative 0.86, 0.14, 0.14, 1.14, 4.14. Then let's finish to calculate the z-scores. So you need to divide the value from x minus x bar by standard deviation. So S is already given. So you put x minus x bar, which is from negative 2.86 divided by S value 2.27. Then you will get negative 1.26. Then you will have percentile. Then your percentile is 10.38. So this one has some information. Your score is on the left side because you can see negative sign. That means your score 1 is negative 1.26 standard deviation below the mean. So let's take a look at this normal distribution. Your z-score is negative 1.26, somewhere around here. Your score is right here. So now you can see you are way below 50 percentile in this distribution with this data set. Your z-score is negative 1.26. So negative 1.26 is somewhere around here. So your score is negative 1.26 standard deviation below the mean. What is your percentile? Your percentile is 10.38, 10.38, 10.38, somewhere around here. All the way from left to here, negative 1 is 13, about 16%, right? Your percentile is 10.38. What if your score is 8? 8. Your score is 8, which is bigger than the mean. So without calculation, you can see you are way better than the mean. So your score should be on the right side. And your score 8 is 1.82 standard deviation above the mean. Your score is on the right side and your score is 1.82 standard deviation above the mean, and that is 96.56% in this data set. So your score is somewhere around here, 1.82, close to +2. And you are almost 96.56 percentile. Okay? Good. So let's go back to introduction. Number 5, differences between T and Z scores. As you can see on the right side, the Z scores are typically ranging from -3. Typically, okay? Typically -3 to +3. That will cover almost 99.9 percentile right there. Up to +3 is covering 99.9999%. So if your Z-score is bigger than +3, that means you are almost top. Okay, so that is the range for the Z-scores. What about T-scores? As you can see here, you can read, when the Z-score is -3, your T-score is 20. When your Z-score is -3, your T-score is 20. How do you calculate this one? Let's use the formula. Z equals x minus x bar over s, right? T equals 10 times Z plus 50. What we need to calculate the T-score is this formula. So if Z equals 0, that means you are the same as the mean. So when Z is 0, what is your T? T equals 10 times Z plus 50 equal 50. Right? So let's make sure when your Z score is 0, what is your T score? That is 50. When your Z score is +3, then your T score will be 80. So using this table figure, you can see a Z score is ranging from -3 to +3, and T score will range from 20 to 80. So remember, typically Z scores will range somewhere in between -3 to +3. T scores plus 20 to plus 80. Right, so that is the difference in terms of their range. What about the second one? Then you can see there are negative Z scores. That will give you some ideas. Well, once Z score is negative, that means you are below the mean. When your Z score is positive numbers, that means you are better than the mean, right? However, some people are confused by this negative sign, right? So, for example, you work as a PE teacher and you're explaining to your students' parents, or your students, your daughters, your sons, standardized score in terms of Z score is -2. And -2, well, most people don't really understand what that means. Then some people will ask, what does -2 or 3 means? Then you need to explain, right? So without having this confusion, you can convert your Z scores into T scores. Then you will have all positive scores in t-scores. So t-scores will typically range from 20 to 80, right? So which one has both plus and negative sides? That's a z-scores. Which standard score has all positive scores? That is t-scores, just because of this formula, right? This formula. Again, if you have z-scores, you will be able to calculate t-scores. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay, let me stop this video and I will continue to explain how to calculate z-scores and t-scores using Excel and SPSS. I'll see you soon. Okay, thank you.